The young queen stood at the entrance to the inner court, her heart a drum of terror. By law, anyone who approached the king uninvited was put to death unless the golden scepter was extended.
If he does not lift that scepter, my life ends here.
But to understand why she was willing to die, you must see where she came from.
If they learn you are a Jew, they will destroy you.
Those were the words Mordecai spoke to the girl who would one day become queen of Persia. When the king searched the empire for a new queen, Esther was taken to the palace with hundreds of others. Against all odds, the orphan girl was chosen. She wore the crown, but the secret remained sealed behind her royal smile. Now that same queen stood at the king's door, about to break the one law that could cost her everything. The question was not whether she would enter. It was whether the king would let her live. It started with a king's fury and a queen who dared to refuse him. King Ahasuerus summoned Queen Vashti to parade her beauty before his nobles. She would not come. Enraged, the king issued a decree: gather the most beautiful young women in the empire for a royal selection. In Susa, officers came to the home of Mordecai. They took his young cousin, Esther, without explanation.
Do not reveal your people or your family. Speak to no one of your true name.
If I speak, I die. If I live, I may never see his face again.
Inside the harem, Esther disappeared among a sea of rivals. Her only protection was the silence Mordecai demanded.
I am a shadow here, a girl without a past. That is the only way I survive.
Mordecai circled the courtyard daily, but no word reached him. The walls held their secrets. In that gilded prison, the orphan began an ascent no one could have foreseen toward the crown of Persia. When her turn came, Esther was brought into the king's presence. She wore only the robes he gave her, nothing of her own heritage.
He must see only what he wants to see, a face without a history.
That night, the king's heart was captured. He loved Esther more than all the other women. He placed the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. After the celebration, Esther glimpsed Mordecai at the gate, still watching, still silent.
You are my only tether to who I am, and I cannot even speak to you.
So she ruled, a queen in public, a hidden woman in private.
I wear the crown, I sleep in the palace, but my soul sleeps in the grave of my secret.
4 years, the secret held. But then a day came when silence would mean death, and the young queen would face the choice that brought her back to the king's door. The crisis that would test everything began when the king promoted a man named Haman above all his princes. The king commanded every servant to bow before Haman, every knee bent, except one.
Who is that Jew who defies the king's command? He bows to no one.
When Haman learned Mordecai was a Jew, his hatred spread like fire.
There is a people scattered among the nations, with laws different from all others. If it please the king, let them be destroyed.
The king drew off his signet ring and gave it to Haman. Do with them as you please. Royal scribes were summoned. The decree was written and sealed. On the 13th day of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, were to be killed. Couriers raced through every province, spreading the death sentence across the empire. In the city of Susa, the Jews fell into confusion and anguish. But Esther, inside the palace, had not yet heard, and thus a day of slaughter was set in stone, its shadow falling over the queen, who believed herself safe. Word reached the queen that Mordecai was at the gate in sackcloth, groaning loudly, distressed. Esther sent him fine garments to put on, but he refused to accept them.
Why won't he let me help? What darkness has fallen outside these walls?
So Esther summoned a trusted eunuch and sent him to learn what troubled her cousin. The eunuch returned not with words, but with a copy of the death decree. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, all Jews, young and old, women and children, are to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated.
This is my mother's name, my father's blood. It's me. They have sentenced me to die.
The eunuch delivered Mordecai's urgent instruction. She must go to the king and beg for her people.
Go before the king uninvited? Everyone knows that means death.
The queen sat alone with the scroll, the weight of an entire people pressing on her chest. The law of the inner court was absolute. Any unsummoned approach meant death, unless the king extended the golden scepter.
I haven't been called into his presence for over 30 days. His affection has clearly cooled.
So she dispatched a messenger back to Mordecai with a stark reply. All the king's servants and the people of the provinces know that if anyone goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law: to be put to death. Only if the king holds out the golden scepter to someone may that person live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days.
There, I've told him. He cannot ask me to throw my life away for nothing.
But even as the words left her, a hollow ache settled in her chest.
What if by saving myself, I doom them all? What kind of queen does that?
The queen fell across the cushions, the decree still clutched in her hand, the silence of the palace mocking her. She had drawn the line. Now she waited to see if Mordecai would accept it or push her further. Mordecai's answer came back with the morning light, carried by a servant with a grave face. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?
He's saying my silence won't save me. It will only damn me alongside my people. For such a time as this. Was that whispered to me when I first stepped into this palace?
The crown on her table seemed to glow, no longer a symbol of status, but of a divine appointment.
There is no escape. Only a choice between dying as a coward or living as a queen.
Mordecai had left her no room to hide. The next move was hers, and the cost had already been counted. Esther summoned her eunuch and spoke words that sealed her fate.
Go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will also fast in the same way. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish.
Mordecai spread the word. That night, every Jew in Susa began to fast, crying out to their God. Inside the palace, Esther removed her royal robes and dressed in sackcloth. She refused all food.
3 days without food or water. My body will be weak, but my spirit must be stronger than the king's decree.
For 72 hours, the queen and her people held nothing back. Their only hope was a single unsummoned step. The fast became a countdown. Each hour brought her closer to the golden throne and to death. On the 3rd day, Esther rose from her knees. The fast was over. The moment of truth had arrived. As the sun rose, Esther let her maids bathe her and dress her in royal robes of crimson and gold. Each piece of jewelry felt heavier today, not just metal, but the weight of a nation resting on her shoulders.
This is no longer a costume. It is armor.
A maid swept dark kohl across her lids, the ancient paint of queens and warriors.
If I die as queen. Let them remember that.
She turned to the polished bronze mirror. Her face was thin from fasting, but her eyes burned with a fire no feast could extinguish.
I am walking into death, but I am not walking alone.
The woman who stepped away from that mirror was not the girl who had entered the harem. That girl was gone. Guards snapped to attention as she exited her chambers. The queen was walking toward the throne, unsummoned. The long corridor stretched before her, silent and golden. At its end, either the scepter or the blade. Her sandals tapped a steady rhythm on the marble. Each step a heartbeat, each heartbeat a defiance.
Mordecai's face, the decree. 3 days of empty mouths crying out, It all comes down to this.
Courtiers pressed against the walls, eyes wide. No one dared speak. The unsummoned queen moved like a ghost. 2 guards at the inner court entrance exchanged a fearful glance, then stepped aside. She was still the queen.
The threshold. What waits beyond it will judge my life.
She closed her eyes, and her lips formed words no human ear could hear, an ancient prayer from an exile's tongue.
God of my fathers, if I have found favor, let this cup pass. If not, give me strength to drink it.
Then her eyes opened. The girl who once hid her name now walked into the light to claim it. King Ahasuerus sat on his distant throne, his expression a mask of stone as the uninvited queen approached. For one eternal moment, the empire held its breath. The law demanded death. The scepter rested, unmoving. The king's eyes narrowed as the queen drew closer. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed his stone mask. Slowly, his hand moved toward the golden scepter. Every breathing soul in the court watched that single motion.
Please, in the name of all that is holy, let him lift it.
And then the scepter rose. It extended toward her like a bridge across the chasm of death. Esther stumbled forward, her knees weak from fasting, until her trembling fingers touched the golden tip.
Alive. I am still alive.
The king's voice, once distant, now sounded almost gentle. What is it, Queen Esther?
Even to half of my kingdom, it will be given to you.
The words hung in the air, a blank check written in the blood of mercy. Now, the queen must speak.
Half the kingdom. But I do not want your gold. I want my people's breath.
Esther steadied her voice and spoke the words she had rehearsed in the dark.
If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet I have prepared.
The king nodded, and a servant hurried to summon Haman. The trap was set. That evening, in a chamber thick with perfume and candlelight, the 3 reclined at the table.
What is your petition, Queen Esther? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be granted.
If I have found favor, let the king and Haman come again tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare. Then I will do as the king says.
Haman's chest swelled with pride. The queen had singled him out, and the wine only sweetened his delusion. But as he left the banquet, an old fury reignited, for at the king's gate, Mordecai still refused to rise. Haman's joy curdled into venom. He would deal with this Jew once and for all. The queen's invitation hung in the air like the scent of jasmine, sweet, but hiding a sharp edge. Haman stormed into his house, the joy of the banquet already soured by the sight of Mordecai.
Even Queen Esther permitted no one but me to accompany the king to the banquet. Yet that Jew sits at the gate like a stone, refusing to bow. My glory turns to dust because of him.
His wife and friends fed his rage with a venomous suggestion.
Build a gallows 75 feet high. Tomorrow I will ask the king to hang Mordecai on it.
Workers labored through the night, the towering gallows rising against the torchlit sky. That same night, sleep fled from King Ahasuerus. He ordered the book of records brought. A servant read aloud from the chronicles, recounting the day Mordecai exposed a plot against the king's life.
What honor or reward has been given to Mordecai for this?
The servant replied, "Nothing, my lord." The king's eyes narrowed in thought. At dawn, the king asked who was in the outer court. Haman had just arrived, eager to secure Mordecai's death.
What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?
Whom would the king delight to honor more than me? Let a royal robe be brought, and a horse the king has ridden, with a royal crown on its head. Let the man be led through the city square, proclaiming, "Thus shall it be done to the man the king delights to honor."
A cruel glint entered the king's eye. The command fell like a hammer.
Hurry, take the robe and the horse, as you have said, and do so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Leave out nothing of what you have mentioned.
Haman's world shattered. The honors he had imagined for himself were now to be given to his mortal enemy. So Haman robed Mordecai in the king's garment, set him upon a royal steed, and led him through the city square, shouting the honor he had designed for himself. The gallows in Haman's courtyard stood forgotten, for now the noose was tightening around his own neck. Mordecai returned to the gate, but Haman rushed home in grief, his head covered, a man utterly undone. Inside his own house, Haman tore his robes and wept. But his wife and friends offered no comfort. They warned him, "If Mordecai is of Jewish origin, you will not overcome him. You will surely come to ruin."
Ruin. I am the king's favorite. The queen invites me to her table. This is just a stumble.
But before he could finish his denial, the king's eunuchs arrived at his door. They announced that the queen's second banquet was prepared, and he must come at once.
The banquet. My fate will be sealed there, yet I cannot refuse.
With a face ashen as death, Haman rose and followed them. The gallows in his courtyard, now a silhouette in his mind. The same gallows he had built for Mordecai now seemed to stretch its shadow toward his own neck. He walked to the palace, each step heavier, the weight of 1,000 warnings pressing on his chest. The trap was set. The queen was waiting, and Haman was walking straight into it. The second banquet began in a haze of perfume and candlelight, but the air itself felt charged with unspoken words.
What is your petition, Queen Esther? Even up to half my kingdom, it shall be granted.
This is the moment. Speak the words that will either save a nation or end my life. If I have found favor in your sight, O king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated.
The king's hand tightened around his goblet. His eyes flickered from the queen to Haman and back.
Who is he? And where is he? Who would dare presume in his heart to do such a thing?
Esther's trembling arm lifted, her finger pointing directly at the man beside her.
An adversary and enemy, this wicked Haman.
The king shot to his feet and stormed into the garden, his fury barely contained. Haman sat frozen, death in his eyes. The king's footsteps had barely faded when Haman threw himself at Esther's couch, all dignity gone.
Spare my life, O queen. I plead with you. Do not let me die.
The garden door swung open. The king stood there, and his eyes blazed at the scene before him.
Will he even assault the queen in my own house?
Guards seized Haman instantly. A cloth was pressed over his face, blinding him to the fury he had awakened. A eunuch reminded the king of the gallows Haman had built for Mordecai, standing tall at his house.
Hang him on it.
The order hung in the air like the crack of a whip. Haman's knees buckled. They dragged the condemned man from the banquet hall, his muffled cries lost in the corridor. The trap Esther had set was now complete. The gallows would receive the one who built them. At dawn, Haman was led to his own courtyard. The gallows he had raised for Mordecai now received its architect. When the king's anger subsided, he gave the house of Haman to Esther. Then he summoned Mordecai. The king drew off his signet ring, the same ring that had sealed the death decree, and placed it on Mordecai's finger. Esther fell at the king's feet a second time, her voice now thick with tears of hope.
If it pleases the king and I have found favor, let an order be given to revoke the letters devised by Haman. For how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred?
See, I have given you the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now you yourselves write a decree concerning the Jews as you see fit, and seal it with the king's ring.
Mordecai summoned the royal scribes. A new decree was written in every language of the empire. The king granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves on the very day intended for their destruction. Couriers on swift horses carried the edict to the farthest provinces. The day of doom had become a day of deliverance. When the edict reached the provinces, the Jews' sorrow turned to wild hope. They prepared for the 13th day of Adar, not as victims, but as warriors. When the day arrived, their enemies attacked, but found no easy slaughter. In every city, from Susa to the farthest province, the Jews defended themselves and prevailed. The fear of Mordecai fell upon all the officials, and no one dared stand against the Jews.
The day of death has become a day of life.
From her window, Esther watched the city exhale. The streets that would have run red with blood were filled with dancing.
He saved his people.
The evil that Haman had plotted was overturned, and a great joy swept through the empire. What was meant for evil, the God of Israel had turned for good. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews, establishing the festival of Purim. Therefore, these days were called Purim, after the Pur, the lot that Haman cast for their ruin. He commanded them to celebrate annually as the days when the Jews got relief from their enemies. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, confirmed this second letter with full royal authority. The Jews agreed to continue what they had begun and to observe what Mordecai had written. They ordained that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation. The festival of Purim was not just a holiday. It was a living witness that God turned mourning into dancing. Families prepared baskets of food and gifts for the poor, so that no one would forget the great reversal. Children would ask, "Why do we celebrate?" And parents would tell the story of Esther. Thus, the orphan who became queen became the memory that would never die. And so, the girl who once trembled at the king's door became the woman who saved a nation. She was an orphan, an exile, a hidden queen. When the moment demanded, she stood. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is trusting a purpose larger than yourself. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther's story is proof that God places people in palaces for purposes they cannot see. When you face your own threshold, remember, the scepter may waver, but courage will always rise. From terror to triumph, from orphan to queen. Her name means star, and her light still shines. So, when you feel forgotten, remember the orphan in the palace. Your such a time may be nearer than you know. Share this story if you believe that one person's courage can change destiny. For such a time as this, remember the orphan girl, raised in exile, who never dreamed she would wear a crown. She became queen of the greatest empire on earth, yet her true name remained a secret. When death threatened her people, she did not run. She fasted, she prayed, she put on her royal robes. She walked through the palace corridors, knowing each step could be her last. The golden scepter extended. Mercy triumphed over law, and the enemy who sought to destroy God's people was hanged on his own gallows. The signet ring passed to Mordecai, and a new decree brought hope. The day of death became a day of deliverance. A feast called Purim. Sometimes God places an orphan in a palace to save a nation. And if I perish, I perish. Esther 4, 16.